It's not manly to be offended by everything. Ryan Leake wants to help you be unoffendable. Taking a look at the Bible, we'll see how Israel moved on after Joshua's death, and how Nick Myers and Eric Falconer saved a wayward traveler. It's migrating them into the Hall of Heroes. Coming up in episode 110 of Manly with Andy. Now joining the podcast, Ryan Leake, who has written a book called Unoffendable. And Ryan, this book feels like it came from a personal place.
So I wrote this book in response to the 2016 election. I had no idea it would be more relevant in the 2020 election. I had just never seen so much division in my life. It was just, there was probably around 2015, Black Lives Matter organization campaign was really getting some steam, and police brutality wasn't new. People filming it was. It was being caught on tape. That's what changed. Police brutality wasn't a new thing. So it was like the accountability around that and conversations around what that looked like were just so divisive. And then the 2016 election, just people, it was like people were more political than anything. I do a lot of consulting. And so I'm kind of a middleman by personality and by profession a little bit. I'm always trying to look at both sides of a perspective. You know, I just realized that trying to have these conversations with people, it's the only way that you could have truly healthy conversations is when you would remove offense from the conversation. And it's really kind of like setting ground rules at the very beginning of a conversation that says, hey, I want you to be honest because I don't want you to be politically correct. I really want to know what you actually think, and I really want you to know what I actually think. And if we can both agree that we're going to love and respect each other, no matter what, I think we actually have a chance at actually having a true relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of that missing when people just are yelling past each other right now. One of the things that I think I struggle with a lot is when I see somebody, and I'm sure you see this too as a pastor, when you see somebody, another pastor, someone in your profession that seems like they're more successful than you, and you're thinking, man, I really want to be them, and it's hard to celebrate them. But you say that's kind of one of the tricks of being unoffendable.
We all have this like comparison thing. It doesn't matter. I have lived in every kind of neighborhood you can live in, from suburbs to the inner city. And what I've done in every neighborhood is compare my house to my neighbors. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what neighborhood I lived in or the kind of neighborhood I lived in. The problem was me. And there's something intentional, I think, that can happen when we make a decision to celebrate what is happening with our neighbor and celebrating what's happening in someone else. And sometimes the person that you are jealous of or comparing yourself to is the person you should be praying for, because sometimes we view people as enemies, and it's like, we don't really know what an enemy is. Like when Jesus used the phrase, love your enemies, there was an actual enemy, and it was the Roman Empire. There was actual, like, real persecution on a large scale. Okay. So we're talking like cities being evaporated, okay, burned down, taken over, like crucifixions. They would leave people on crosses to remind them of just how powerful they were. So when Jesus used those words, it was like, love your, we make enemies out of Facebook friends. It's like, what?
Yeah, a bad Instagram comment. Someone
like, what? Like, are you serious? And so if Jesus would tell them that, like, on our level, it's so much smaller. It doesn't mean that we don't have people that aren't against us, sure, but at the level that his audience was dealing with an actual enemy, it was a proportion I don't think any one of us in today's modern society can ascertain. And so I think we have some decisions to make about, you know, when we see someone else get celebrated, sometimes we can be offended that someone isn't celebrating us. Someone can be getting likes and we're not, and we're offended by that. Someone gets more comments, more shares, more retweets, more celebration than us. And I just like to encourage people, man, go to the party. Be a person that celebrates others. I think we all have a friend that no matter what the conversation is about, it always ends up being about them. they could even ask you how you're doing, and somehow that conversation turns into how they're doing. It just, but I think when we make a decision to really be intentional about celebrating the lives of others, and I think we give ourselves a chance to be less offended.
I thought this was kind of interesting too. It's one step to say, okay, I'm not going to be offended by somebody. And then it's another step to say, okay, I'm going to celebrate them. But then you talk about that it's part of being unoffendable is being less offensive to others as well. I feel like that's kind of something that maybe we have to kind of self-check ourselves. And that's always a tough thing to do.
Absolutely. And to me, what this is about, it's self-awareness. And most of us are not. In fact, a lot of people have become more self-aware lately because they've had to wear masks, and they now know what their breath actually smells like. And they didn't before.
Right.
They didn't know. They did not know what everyone else around them was enduring for decades. And now they know. And again, I could apply that same silly principle to so many other things that our loved ones, our colleagues, our friends, our workout partners, our family, like the things that they just go, well, that's just how they are. That's just life. That's just Andrew. That's just Ryan. And most of us don't carry a large amount of self-awareness. And here's what I realize about a person that talks about being unoffendable a lot. I offend people probably every day. I'm a public speaker. I'm sure I've offended. I'm getting ready to speak here in a little bit. I might have already offended someone on this interview. I mean, it is a part of our being. And the reason that is so important to realize, like, man, I could be doing a lot of offending right now, is it allows me to give grace when I'm offended, because I realize I am committing the crime that I wish people didn't commit against me.
Let's talk about this. I thought this was a really cool analogy. Other people's opinions are like elevators.
They can take us up, they can take us down. And I think it's important that you put people's opinions in their proper place. I've been very fortunate and very privileged to get thousands of people's opinions about what I do. So I have so many that I can forget many. When you only get 10 in a year, they can stick with you a little bit more. So I don't want to sound too insensitive in this and kind of carry this notion that you can, just not care what people think. No, I think you should care what people think. I just think you should care about what the right people think. And sometimes that's just choosing the opinions that you're going to take seriously. So if I hear something I don't like, what I do is I then take that to my best friend and say, hey man, I heard this. Someone said this. And, is there a little bit of truth to this? Is there, would you agree? Like, is this something that you wish you could say to me, but this person said it to me because they're a stranger and they don't care? Is there a little bit of truth in this? And is this an area I can grow in? This is putting another person's opinion in its proper place of just going, should I allow it to have credibility? Should I not? But I think when we are swayed by people's opinion, well, that's a roller coaster. That's not very fun, because when you get good opinions, you'll live off of that. And when you get negative opinions, you'll live by that. And I don't think you should live by either. I kind of subscribe to an even keel lifestyle of thinking, where it's, my life isn't up or down because of applause or criticism. I've been called by God to fulfill his purpose in my life, and I'm going to do my best and hopefully live self-aware enough to know when I'm wrong, and hopefully I'm humble enough to know when I'm wrong. But I don't get too high if someone says, man, that's the best message I've ever heard. I say, thanks. I work hard, pray a lot. So, I mean, and if someone says, man, that was the worst message I've ever heard. Dude, your book is terrible. I go, well, I worked really hard. I prayed a lot. It may not have helped you, but it helped some other people. I mean, I sold a lot, so I don't know what you want from me. So, I mean, on some level, you just kind of, I kind of carry this like rhythm of grace. Does that make sense? It's just like, man, there is this anxious-free life that I think Jesus invites us to, where you're not worried about tomorrow. You're just living in the present. You're just there. And sometimes I think people's opinions want to take us other places that we weren't ever supposed to go.
Let's talk about this. I thought this was kind of cool too. You're talking about, people's opinions, but sometimes the biggest offense comes from phantom discouragement.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a big one. I think when it comes to offense, we all turn into Spielberg. We turn into Christopher Nolan. We turn into Tyler Perry. We turn into some of the most creative film directors of all time because we start telling ourselves stories. And what can happen is if you and I are standing next to one another and someone says to me, dude, I love your shoes. What do you instantly do? You look down at your shoes and go, well, my shoes suck. That's what I call phantom discouragement. It's like no one said anything about your shoes. And a compliment of my shoes does not degrade yours. But what we then do is we walk away going, I've got bad shoes. Except people do that with, I've got bad hair, I look bad. Or, if someone's standing next to you and somebody says, man, dude, you look great. Man, you've been losing weight. What you been doing? You hear you're fat. It's like, no one said that. But we have this subconscious phantom discouragement where it's like, no one. When we're so concerned about what's being said about everyone else, we will miss what is very unique and valuable about ourselves. And so there is a way to celebrate others and value what we bring to the table at the same time. Those are not mutually exclusive. Those don't have to be things that we go, well, for them to win, that means I have to lose. Contrary to popular belief, I believe in win-wins. I think we both can win. And if someone is celebrating mine and not celebrating yours, it does not diminish your win by any stretch of the imagination.
I thought this was kind of cool. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, a little bit into it, but I love your insight into the story about the prodigal son and being offended and just talking about how, the older son, he was so mad about what had happened. And he was like, I was responsible, God. And so, what a great example of offense that I had never really dove into.
Yeah, the older brother in the prodigal son story is like, he's out there and he's offended that his dad would do something for him that he would do for his brother that he wouldn't do for him. And his dad's just like, dude, if you want a party, throw a party. You don't actually need me to throw the party to have one. But your brother was lost and he couldn't throw himself a party. He was lost and now he's found. I think for that older brother, if I was sitting across the table, if I was getting coffee with the older brother and he's going, dude, my brother ran off and did this stuff with prostitutes and blew the inheritance to come back. My dad throws him a party. Can you believe that, Ryan? I would say, yeah, I can. You should go to the party. And if you want to throw one next weekend, I'll come to that one too. But sometimes I think we miss out on what is right in front of us because we can be so consumed.
You dove into another great story from the Bible where I think a lot of people get the wrong idea because they don't really dig into it. When Peter is called, goes out onto the water, we all remember that he didn't make it. But
right.
but you've got a better insight instead of looking at that as a failure.
Yeah, I think for Peter was he was getting an opportunity to do something that only two men in human history have ever done. Only two men in human history can say they've walked on water: Jesus and Peter. Following Jesus in Jesus' days meant you did everything like a rabbi, everything. You wanted to mirror your life. You want to spend money like, talk like, teach scripture like, exactly like your rabbi. And so for Peter, he took that very literal. And my perspective on Peter is he's looking at Jesus walk on water. He's like, dude, my rabbi is walking on water. I'm walking on water. You other suckers can do whatever you want in this boat. But, I left my job for this man. So either I'm following him all the way, or I'm not following him at all. It's all or nothing for me. Sink or swim. Let's go. His mentality was just so different. And he's just going, you know what? I can't be so concerned about what's happening in the boat and what the people in my boat are going to think about me when I get out of it. I'm busy following Jesus. And I think that's what separated Peter from the others.
One more quick question, with the election coming up soon, how do we stay, this is a bonus question. How do we stay unoffended when we see something in the news that we don't agree with, or somebody on Facebook says something? Is it possible?
It is. And I'm glad you asked that question because I think it might be the most important question of the season. because I believe Christians have an opportunity in this season to be Christians more than they ever have. And how you treat someone that votes differently than you is how you show Christianity. A lot of people have been saying, no, we'll show we're Christians by how we vote. I'm like, a Tuesday doesn't get to determine how Christian you are. It's actually Wednesday. Wednesday will say more about us when how we treat others in the process. I love what Dr. Tony Evans says. He says, oneness does not mean sameness. In other words, we don't have to agree to be unified. We don't have to think the same to be unified. In fact, it's not diversity if we all think and agree on the same thing. Diversity means different perspectives and different thought patterns have come to the table to agree to love and respect the other one's perspective. And so in this season, I encourage people to go, you should sit with someone that's different than you and just listen. And fight the urge to change them. Fight the urge to get them to think like you and be like you and vote like you and spend money like you, and to really learn something about another human who is nothing like you. That is good for you, and that is good for me. And I can tell you, I'm African American. I sat with a Caucasian couple the other night, and I said, can we have a Black Lives Matter conversation? I won't be offended one bit if you won't either. It was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had. And we disagreed, and it was beautiful. We became closer in disagreement than we did in agreement because it was honest. There was no political correctness. There was no cameras. There was no microphones. It was just friends truly being friends in learning from each other's perspectives and asking genuine questions. And I promise you, if that conversation had been recorded, people would flip out. They would be so offended by things that were said or heard or misconstrued, but because there was love and respect in that conversation, and we said, hey, neither of us are going to walk away offended. It was beautiful. And so my hope and prayer for listeners is that, man, as we continue to be divided, not just on politics, we can be divided on wearing masks, for crying out loud. We can be divided on sending our kids to school. We can be divided on should we be meeting in person in classrooms or virtual. We can be divided on social distancing. We could be divided on police brutality. We can be divided on sports. But isn't it interesting that we're willing to go to Super Bowl parties and cheer for different teams and eat the same wings and eat the same nachos and eat the same pizza and wear different jerseys. But with everything else, we go, oh no, we will not dine together. You are a part of that group and I'm a part of this group, and we will not dine together.
Now jumping back into the Bible, new book. Hey, congratulations. Judges 1. That's where we're starting. Verse 1. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, which tribe should go first to attack the Canaanites? The Lord answered, Judah, for I have given them victory over the land. The men of Judah said to their relatives from the tribe of Simeon, join us to fight the Canaanites living in the territory allotted to us. Then we will help you conquer your territory. So the men of Simeon went with Judah. When the men of Judah attacked, the Lord gave them victory over the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and they killed 10,000 enemy warriors at the town of Bezek. While at Bezek, they encountered King Adonai-Bezek and fought against him, and the Canaanites and Perizzites were defeated. So here we are in Judges 1, right after the death of Joshua. And I think it's good to pause here for a second and think about Joshua again and how great of a leader he was. He led Israel into the promised land, established them there, and left behind a legacy of faithfulness. Losing someone like that can feel like the rug has been pulled out from under you. But what did the Israelites do? They didn't just sit around waiting for another Joshua to show up. Verse 1 says, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord which tribe should go first to attack the Canaanites. See, right there is the key. They turned to God. Instead of focusing on the fact that Joshua was gone, they asked God for direction, and he answered. He said, Judah, for I have given them victory over the land. So with that clarity, the tribe of Judah stepped up, partnered with Simeon, and got to work. So here's the lesson. When a strong leader is no longer there, the mission doesn't stop. God's plans aren't tied to one person. They continue through his people. And just like the Israelites, the best thing we can do is turn to God for guidance and trust him to lead us forward. And here's the other part. The Israelites didn't do it alone. Judah didn't go solo. They called on Simeon to join them, and together they experienced victory. Moving on from a good leader often means stepping into a partnership, sharing responsibilities, and leaning on each other for strength. So if you've ever found yourself feeling lost after a mentor, boss, or leader steps down, remember this. God's work doesn't depend on one person. He's still in control, and he's still giving direction. The question is, will you trust him and step up, just like Judah did? Now entering the Hall of Heroes, Nick Myers and Aaron Falconer. They are rangers who, on a routine patrol through the rugged California mountains, they stumbled upon an unusual climber at 10,000 feet on Mount Shasta, a lone goose. Stranded in the icy terrain of the old ski bowl, the bird was woefully unprepared, with only a single layer of down to protect it from the harsh cold. Acting quickly, the Rangers devised a rescue plan to save the feathered adventurer from certain peril. So they traded their mountaineering duties for a mission of mercy that day, and the Rangers safely relocated the shivering goose to a nearby pond at lower elevations. So because Nick Myers and Eric Falconer saved a wayward travel and reminded us all that even the smallest lives deserve a helping hand, they are officially in the Manly with Andy Hall of Heroes. In a world of confusion and corruption, this ancient resource will restore your faith. Taking a look at the Bible, we'll see the power of generational faith, and Richard West's one-of-a-kind ocean discovery is reeling him into the Hall of Heroes. Coming up next week on Manly with Andy.